Life after death. We do not die but pass into another world, into a new life. Life after clinical death, an eyewitness's story.
I'm 13, I'm in middle school, was hanging out with my mom watching a movie, then we took my sister to her new job out at the movie theater on the edge of town, and as we're pulling out and going to cross one of those 4-lane divided highways, it was pretty normal. As it so happened, there was another car that was sort of hidden by 2 cars that were going the speed limit that was, just for those few seconds, going about 20 miles per hour over. And so we were driving, and I was, passenging, and I was looking to my left to talk to my mother. And then at that moment, it was right about to hit us. I saw this big Lincoln right there, and it was so close and going so quick that my mind had, time to register a couple thoughts. The first one was shit, and the second one, instead of seizing up and panicking immediately, my whole system calmed down. I started finding myself going into this expanded state of consciousness, and the thought kind of came to my mind, I really thought this one was going to go more than 13 years. I pretty much felt, through my whole body, the jig is up, Then the whole life flashing before one's eyes happened, and up to that point, I was fascinated when I read about this phenomena or hear about it. I thought, is that even possible? And sure enough, here it was, just like a reel. Only this time, there was a sense that I was connected with this totally omniscient, completely objective part consciousness, which I had known through life. I'd often have kind of arguments with it, and it would get to kind of come in and say, like, no, don't do that. Of course, I'd get into some sort of trouble when I'd kind of go against the advice there. But only here, it was as if I was completely united with it, and completely falling back into this vast spaciousness and letting go of everything. And as we or I or whatever, we looked through my life together, any place where there was some sort of holding on, any place where I was wearing a mask or I was acting out of fear, any grudges that I held or was holding on to, they were all seen clearly and then just forgiven. There was no harshness to the judgment. It was so matter of fact, and it was very palpable. It was like I was taking a fully experiential trip back through life, and it was as if every place of tightness or tension or resistance, which was the judgment or the pretense, all of those were clear that there was some sort of resistance against the river of life and where it was trying to take me, and it was taking me where it wanted anyways. I was just not enjoying the ride. Along with sort of the seeing of that aspect, there was a palpable release throughout my whole body. And so it felt kind of like, in my case, it felt like there was this thin skin that had been on me my whole life that I'd never noticed. And as I was releasing all of it, it felt like it was being taken off me like the skin of a snake. With each step, there was just such a vast opening and such a vast peace and joy and like a bliss. And when we got to the end, it was just the sense of being immersed in a field of infinite love. There was a sense that love, awareness, clarity, bliss, joy, they were all just different words that were pointing to the same fundamental layer of being. And I remembered that, God, it couldn't have taken much more than a second or two to, from the time of seeing the car to get whacked, but it felt like an eternity was in there. I often describe it as that there was no sense of having to go anywhere to maybe see like the kingdom of heaven or the fundamental reality that's hidden behind the veils. It was as if all the veils were removed from my experience. And even when I looked at the dashboard or my mother's shoulder, everything that was in my sort of perceptual view at the time the sky, the beautiful clouds that were present that day, the face of the driver who seemed to not necessarily be knowing what was happening, because I don't remember those brakes going on. And there was a sense that underneath all of this was this vast light and this vast presence. And there was a sense that, I was no longer simply just in this particular body, but I felt myself in all of those things, just as this vast presence that was spread everywhere. And then there was a recognition that this is life. This state of freedom, this state of not holding on and not having all these barriers and masks. This was what life was meant to be. There was this sense, and there was this knowing and recognition in my heart, as well, of all the times that in my life that I had touched this place. And many of them I was actually conscious that I was touching a place, and there were other times where it was like, the music was playing, I was dancing to it, but I was unconscious that, of the particular song that was moving me. I was so distracted by the sense of this beautiful, beautiful sense of, being everywhere with one light, that it was just a total experience. At a certain point, there wasn't that sort of fundamental sense of oneness in which there was, no fear. That might have been one of the most important facets of the, experience in the accident, was the complete lack of I couldn't even be afraid. I came to, and we were pretty well far from where the impact happened. There was a lot of force involved there, and my mother got the bulk of it. And I remember waking up, coming to the sound of the seatbelt dinger going off, and my mother had very labored breathing. She got all that energy, and the car was pretty well totaled, and they were using the big skill saw. I suppose they call them jaws of life, but it was a saw, so I don't know if they're two different kinds of tools. But anyways, they were having to cut the doors off, and so I remember the doors being cut off, and then paramedics, coming in and very carefully handling my body, making sure, they reckoned I probably had some neck injury or something, and so they were getting me out of there and getting us both onto stretchers. And I remember the view of the paramedics and the view of the sky again, as I was coming to, and they were asking me my name, and I was saying, like, I'm sorry, I really have no idea that answer, but that she's my mother. I know that, and that was the only thing I really knew. They took us into the ambulance, and like I suppose a lot of people, while I was in the shoulder strap in the gurney, I had sort of 2 points of awareness. So there was the normal awareness of being in your body and, kind of looking up at the people asking you questions and putting the flashlight, over your eye and talking to you, keeping you there. But there was also this sense of, again, this sort of diffuse non-locality to my consciousness. I felt like I was also looking down on my body from the ceiling, but also I felt myself in the sky and in the people and in my mother, and she spoke to me a couple times. She was really struggling. I could hear her breathing. That was the almost the main facet of experience was I was paying attention to that. And she called my name out twice, and I said, "I'm okay, Mom," twice. And on the second time, I felt her register it, and she immediately, her breathing went from this really labored breathing to this, just like letting it go, letting it all go. And I felt her, when she was speaking to me, there was a sense of her words and where they were coming from were within me as well. So the best I can explain, that we felt like we were floating in the same, basic substance which united us. And so I felt her leave, and I didn't register that as death. I felt, as her breath went out, I felt her kind of, as if rising out of that body, or just, becoming sort of diffuse. And so, I didn't know that meant that she was dead. And the next thing I knew, I'm being wheeled into a hospital room, and I know that they're, trying to save my mother's life, behind some curtains back there. I couldn't look or see because they still thought I might be really, I was number two. She was clearly damaged, but they thought that I also might have some serious, spinal type things. And so I was, down on a gurney. And then the next I knew, my sister's there, and she's got her out of her workplace, and she's with me. And then my dad, comes out, and he says, I'm sorry, your mother's gone. And, that was just, there I'm back in my body and human emotions again. And, I'm absolutely like somebody took a medicine ball and threw it into my stomach as hard as they could. I'm just crying, and we're sort of, they realized I didn't have any injuries, and so I'm up out of the gurney, and we're walking out the hallway, and the Lutheran Social Services people are there with well-intentioned hugs that I wasn't necessarily interested in. Just wanted to have my freedom of movement, and to kind of go out, and we're picked up by friends of the family and brought home, and it's there's that emotional devastation that's there, that's totally raw. And at the same time, there is this vast consciousness, which at that point my faculties were coming back, and I thought, this must be shock. This is the shock I've heard about. The other interesting thing was that when I could play with it, I could feel it in others, I could see it in the trees, when I could put my attention more into it, kind of like I could take my mind off of the thoughts and the feelings, and I could relax back into the space. And when I would do that, bliss and joy would just flood my body. And I'm saying, like, you're not supposed to be feeling bliss and joy. This is peculiar, It was, because there was clearly the damaged psyche of a 13-year-old who'd lost their mother, but at the same time there was this bliss and joy, and even just ancient wisdom and intuitive and heightened intuition and perceptions, and heightened empathy, in a sense, like people weren't fooling me anymore. I could see more deeply into them. So I could see that if my mother hadn't died, I would probably have not reached some of the places that I've gone back to so quickly, because the motivation simply might not have been there. The wound within the wounds are the blessings for so many of us.
See also other interesting videos about life after death on our channel.